Orlando, Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, your neighbor, David Granosky. So glad to be with you again for another journey through the news. Today, live, we're coming to you here on April 14th, 2022 AD. And for many people around the world, they're going to celebrate Good Friday tomorrow. That'll be exciting. We'll be doing a special edition of Things Hidden, our online-only podcast, which you can find at aneighborschoice.com. That's aneighborschoice.com, where you'll find our Things Hidden podcast, doing a special Resurrection Sunday focus with Shannon Braswell, my guest for that podcast. It'll be a fun exploration of what the resurrection means in history, objectively speaking, looking at the impact of that event in anthropological course correction in our society, how it reshaped what it means to be human, what it means to have society, and what it means to get along with one another. So you can look forward to that on Friday on Things Hidden, our podcast, which is online only, something that you don't hear on the radio. That's something that we do only on the podcast or video stream platform, Rumble, BitChute, aneighborschoice.com. So when you see these events unfolding, understand that we're coming from a big picture view, how we got here. People want to make Jesus' statements just, happy, nice little sayings. They don't want to deal with the crucifixion, death, burial, and resurrection part. And those who do want to deal with the death, burial, and resurrection part about Jesus' life oftentimes get that wrong and what it actually means. But for most people in the modern world, they want to keep Jesus as just a few nice sayings, nice little truisms, little sage advice. What he was actually dealing with was how to deal with human society in light of the fact that he was going to destroy the sacred old pagan order that had dominated world history up until that point. He was saying you have to love your neighbor and you have to forgive your neighbor and you have to turn the other cheek, not because it's cute and sweet and gives you sentimental feelings. Not that those things are bad, but it's not the purpose of those teachings. The purpose of the teachings is this is the only way your human societies are going to survive when I destroy the satanic system of sacrificial violence. That's what Jesus is teaching all that for. He's giving you a blueprint, a roadmap, a survival guide for human history and human society post-destruction of the sacrificial violence that had held it together. Ancient societies were held together through the common glue of sacrificial scapegoating and purging and murdering and casting out certain people to keep the common good together. And the myth that people told each other in those societies reinforced the goodness of doing those sacrificial rituals. That's why all societies had sacrifices. That's why they all had gods that they offered their hearts to. Okay? This was a universal feature of human societies, and it manifested in different shades and different variations, but the fundamental structure was one against many, against the many coming against one to purge them for the sins of the community. And Jesus destroyed that fundamentally in the death, burial, and resurrection in his life. And so his life teachings are not just cute truisms that are kind of separated from the death, burial, and resurrection. They are actually tied together. He's giving you a blueprint. This is how you have to get along, because once I strip the scapegoat violence out of your society, you will fall into absolute chaos. Voila, here we are, 2022. If you do not stop the mimetic envy, the mimetic desire, right? And that's what we're in today. For example, why do we have this issue with everybody obsessed with trying to teach children to be, a new gender? Because we're in a state of undifferentiation. When you have competition, eventually the competitors look alike. You can't tell the difference. Why do you think we have gender identity phenomena so powerful? In the ancient world, the ones who were the undifferentiated gender were the domain of the sacred priests. In the pagan world, they would trot out a priest. They had them all over these cultures. They had gods. Go look at ancient Eastern cultures. Gods, ancient Western cultures, gods who were amorphous in their gender identity. And they were either gods or priests who were harbingers of undifferentiation that would preside over a sacrifice to appease the masses' anger and resentment. And everybody agreed, and everybody believed that it was good and right to do so. Now, Jesus came into history and said, no, that's not good. I don't care if everybody in your society's doing it. It's wrong, and I'm going to demonstrate it through throwing my own body and life and soul into that very pattern of human behavior, allowing you to scapegoat me, and I'm going to have my followers write about the truthful account about what happened to me, so that when you read it, you can't unsee it every time you look at history going forward. Obviously, people are slow to learn that lesson, but the lesson started to infect human society up until the point where we're at in 2000 AD, when we are afraid of hurting animals, and so much so that we'd rather poison our bodies with toxic seed oil sludge, fake meat, than to kill a poor precious animal. That's how haunted we are by sacrifice, because of what Jesus inaugurated in history. That doesn't mean he intended us to be scared to eat red meat. It means when you have a society that refuses to reject violence in its true wicked forms, it will find other ways to make itself feel comforted by the fact that it is attacking other moral imperfections in society, like eating red meat, right? If you have a society that wants to drone strike everybody in the world, how do they make themselves feel better? Well, hey, look, someone who is undifferentiated in their gender expression is now leading that. Or a person who is a minority, who is someone who would be in a community that would be persecuted or marginalized in decades past, is now the vice president. So therefore, it's okay that they bomb people to hell and back, right? You see, that's what we do. We don't want to let go of the violence that holds so much fascination in the hearts of people, but the violence doesn't unite us anymore, and therefore it doesn't contain violence, and therefore we continue to fall further and further into a state of undifferentiation. So what do we have today? We have gender wars, right? You're not supposed to say a distinction. You're not supposed to say it is the standard that a father should, if possible, try to be the breadwinner of the house, and the wife should, if possible, be able to raise the children and not ship them off to a government agency that is patterned after Prussian industrial product development and prison systems, okay? It's not a good idea to let that be the place by which your child's worldview is cultivated. Rather, it should be cultivated in the home. And for you to make a statement to say, a man, if in the ideal picture, and I understand that we're in a difficult situation, and I understand that people have to work 2 jobs, most people to afford, because we have abandoned the principles of freedom in Christ personhood. So we are in such a state where most people have to have multiple jobs to be able to keep the bills paid for. But the ideal normative standard that we should be fighting for is that in a good environment, it would be good to fight for the husband providing for the family, and the wife being able to take care of the children. Because that is now taboo, what happens? The genders are now at war, supposedly, about who's going to be the CEO, who's going to be the military fighter jet pilot, who's going to be the mercenary who can gut the most soldiers. Will it be the male or the female? Who's the best? Who's the best Jedi in the galaxy? It's not Luke, it's this person who pops up and fights and kills everybody in two seconds, right? This gender war eventually means a state of undifferentiation to the point where we now don't know what gender is. Very interesting. We'll continue in just a moment live on A Neighbor's Choice. We're not the first society to have a time of undifferentiation, right? A time where you don't know who's who and what's what. We're not the first society to have that. We've had societies going through moments of undifferentiation since the dawn of time and before recorded time, when desire and envy and rivalry goes too far. But that's the distinction. There was a moment in time for societies. It wasn't the standard default setting. There was a moment in time in which societies would sometimes fall into a crisis of competition between one another, to the point where they'd lose their sense of who they were, who their self was. And it was sacrifice that split that nonsense and caused people to say, wait a second, you know who we're not? We're not that monster over there. We're not that, eventually they would say, God over there that we had to kill or send off the cliff for our rain to come back down, or our crops to grow bigger, or our society to not fall into absolute famine or chaos. And so those were pockets of time that would be solved by sacrificial violence, and from that sacrificial violence, the societies would then organize themselves into a hierarchy to keep undifferentiation and out-of-control competition at bay. There wasn't an American dream of being able to come with 2 cents in your pocket and climb your way up to the very top to become a millionaire or a billionaire in ancient societies. Pick one. You won't find a single one where that kind of aspirational normative was a standard by which people could believe in and even aspire and even achieve in some examples. If you were born in a lonely state, that was your caste, and you were not allowed to move out of it. Maybe there could be some little upward movement here or there in certain circumstances, but there was no idea that the person with the lowest of the low, an outsider coming into a society like the American dream says, could then achieve greatness and become president or a billionaire or a captain of industry or something like that. So that American dream concept that we take for granted and now mock in some cases was only possible because of Jesus destroying that rigid hierarchical structure of ancient societies that said, you must stay in your place, because if we allow people freedom, they won't know how to control themselves, and they'll run everything into the ground of chaos and rivalry and conflict and obsessing with one another in their status. That's what we have today. And we're not supposed to have that. We could have followed the path of Jesus, which is why you have to read the gospel parts where he talks about how to get along with one another. You can't just read the dying, burial, resurrection part and not get, in order to understand what to do when that event happened, the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, you have to understand what he's telling you to do. Because what he's telling you to do not resist evil with violence, love your neighbor as yourself, stay out of the political system in terms of trying to use that as your proper means of getting your neighbor to behave themselves, understanding the respect for free choice. I mean, even the gospel stands on Peter crying as something that's a revolutionary thing. Peter was a poor fisherman. There was no piece of literature in that era that was concerning itself with the emotional state of grief that a poor, illiterate fisherman would have about being isolated and betraying his hero or his master or his teacher, as the gospel accounts Peter feels when he is betrayed and realizes that he's betrayed Jesus. These are radical things that had never happened before in texts, in stories, in reality, in that time period in history, and we are the beneficiaries of that 2,000 years later, and we forget what it was that was so special and radical that we need to follow. We forget all that to our own demise, to our own peril. Social media has become another state of undifferentiation. Because in the old days, you had a few newspapers and that was it. They told you what reality was, and they'd fight between themselves over being pro-Tory or pro-revolutionary patriot. But then you had TV stations, and they try to consolidate. Okay, you have these many TV stations nationally, and then radio, and radio becomes before TV, and different things like that. And these different pieces of media control the flow of information and try to create one-size-fits-all narratives to show you what reality is. And now with social media, that's being blown apart, where people from every walk of life all over the world can give a different photograph of a civilian death and say, or a video, and say, actually, it wasn't that team that killed the civilian, it was that team. Or it wasn't this group, it was that group. Right? Or that was not a justified police shooting. Here's a cell phone video I captured that shows a different angle. And when you have all these different decentralized media outlets, media stations all around us, billions of people, that's a good thing, but it also, if you don't have Christianity structuring that, it becomes chaos. It becomes a state of rivalry and obsession with status, and then ultimately people become so obsessed with status that they lose sense of what's right and wrong, and they're lying and believing in delusions. So all of those different things we see, where competition makes us lose sight even of the point of distinctions between gender, or distinctions between who is a credible source of information and who is a liar in media, this will continue to accelerate. And the only thing that will bring order and differentiation is the personhood revolution that Jesus tried to and is demonstrating to us in the gospel text. It's important for you to understand that the gospel text for how you live is the survival guide of the post-resurrection reality, where Jesus vanquished the scapegoat mechanism, the sacrificial violent system that had glued together societies in the ancient world through a lie and through collective purging of individuals for catharsis, for relief of tension from the community. Now we don't have any sacrifice that binds us together. They try it, and the more they try it, it doesn't unite. It just splits us further. And so rivalry continues, aggression continues, obsession with one another continues, obsession with status continues, obsession with entitlement continues, obsession with being a star, obsession with trying to create a new identity to stand up from a sea of sameness. All of that will continue until we start imitating the survival guide of life in a post-resurrection reality that Jesus laid out in the teachings prior to his death, burial, and resurrection. There's nobody in the world that I've heard explaining this as it is in broadcast media And so we're doing something different here. I understand it may seem a little different. We are on a news talk station. We're not on a religious show, and I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about survival, about how to get along with each other, how to have sanity back. We want to make sanity great again, right? We want to make differences great again. Differentiation is healthy. But because we see that sacrifice doesn't work anymore, but we still try it in clever new ways, now we feel the need to outlaw differentiation, because differentiation can be the occasion for sacrifice, so therefore we feel that it in and of itself is wicked and wrong. That's why we are taught to not have any pride in our own local community or our own country, because, if you like your country more than others, that might make you a warmonger or an imperialist. No, it doesn't have to. It's okay. It's okay to cater more for your family than the family down the road. But that has to be in tension with the gospel imperative to go out and to love your neighbor as yourself. You have to hold those things in paradoxical balance, right? Because if you take that, I'll take care of my family over everybody else, if you take that too far, which we all mostly do, you end up with wars and, my team can go to war and invade a country because we have all these reasons. Well, every country and every team has always said that. Welcome to everybody else's excuses. Or, I get to throw this neighbor in a cage because they did a drug that's really scary, and I'm afraid if they did that drug, they could hurt me one day and get high. Which they can get high on caffeine and raid your house. You're not going to ban caffeine. That'd be stupid and barbaric. Right? So think about this, and we'll unpack this some more on A Neighbor's Choice Radio. Stay tuned. You can call in at 727-587-1040 or email us hello@aneighborschoice.com. Choice Radio. So there's the big story, and I'm excited about it because I think it could be a big, big moment for our globalized world, which is what Elon Musk has done. Is he's trying to buy Twitter and take it private. And I've been following this story, and I think it's exciting. I think it's very interesting, right? I think Darren Beattie had it right when he said, he's at Revolver.News, and he says, that Elon Musk buying Twitter could do more for American patriots than the GOP could do through any election victory in 2024. I think that is an accurate statement. There's more at stake. Now, you could get and say, there's wars and stuff, but the GOP is going to put people in there that would be likely to go to war and nuclear war, too. So they're not really going to stop that. So it's true. This is more important than politics, which is a victory for those of us who like liberty, not politics. Because it demonstrates that what one man can do in the market is more consequential than what politicians using your money can do in the state. You see that? What one man can do through his own skin in the game has more consequence for changing the world than what we can do by voting for some goober to go off and put his little vote in among 500, or if he's the president, make a suggestion, and then the Mitch McConnells and snakes that run the whole thing would just go ahead and do their own typical deal. It's ownership. It's having skin in the game that changes the game. You know, Mitch McConnell doesn't have any skin in the game. Paul Ryan, they don't have skin in the game. They're playing with your money. It's not their money. They don't care. And they've got a nice, well-oiled scam ripoff fraud going. They know how to tickle your ears with garbage rhetoric. I mean, and all the other most of the other politicians are doing the same thing. They're not going to do anything substantial to improve your life. But if real skin in the game opportunities take place, and most billionaires are going to be on the side of being risk averse and crooked. Because in a world in which to be rich, you usually have to get connections from the government, that connections to the government factor makes most billionaires crooked or part of the system and wanting to maintain the corrupt system, or beholden to that corrupt system so they don't want to rock the boat even if they want to. And Elon Musk, of course, a lot of his money comes from being in industries which government has put a lot of cash and subsidies and inertia, like, you know, clean energy and electric batteries and so forth, right? But that he's playing in the world that we are, okay? He could have been an absolutist and say, and I understand, I disagree with subsidies and all these things, and I've criticized that. But he could have been a purist and said, I will not start an electric car company unless I don't have any subsidies. But then the oil companies get subsidies from the government. So you see, if you want to do something better, you have to play within the system that you have. And I understand that goes way off the deep end and everybody becomes corrupt. But for some reason, Elon Musk still wants to apparently do the right thing and create an environment in which a Twitter platform can actually be a place for real debate. And that terrifies the establishment. That terrifies the people who are merchants of war. They've got to make their bullets, and they want to skew and manipulate and gaslight people into believing they're crazy for not wanting to escalate war. That there's something wrong with them because they don't want to participate in murdering people who did nothing to them. And they don't want to participate in a lose-lose situation between far-off people murdering each other, and you don't need to be involved, and you don't need to escalate it, and you don't need to be destroying your economy to make some munitions manufacturer rich in the process. And you shouldn't feel ashamed of that, and you should be able to get information dispersed around the internet in that vein. But the garbage lowlifes who have hijacked that public discourse on a platform like Twitter and others, they don't want you to have that freedom conversation. They don't want to have a pro-life conversation, an anti-war conversation. They can't handle it. They can't win. They have to rig the game. They are the villains. They're just like the villains in a Batman movie. They're always playing a trick. They have to cheat to win. They have to cheat to win. They can't win in a fair fight because the truth beats them handily. They can't stand it, so they have to rig things. And when you have a public company like Twitter, you get all these activist investor blocks and groups that have all these radical, disgusting, imperialistic worldviews, all these resentment, undifferentiation views about screwing up people's identity. And they want to impose those wicked views onto you. And they want to rig the conversation to elevate these insane views to a place they would never have in a free, real skin in the game market. So to see someone put their money where their mouth is, he could ride it cozy. He's got industries that are completely on the establishment's line of thought, green energy stuff, right? He doesn't have to do this, but to take that capital and try to do something with it. And, you know, he's a fallen human being, so he could be tempted into doing wrong. That's the point of being a human. The point is he's trying to do something, and it sounds like he's got great intentions to do something about this wicked system we have, where people are not even allowed to know about drugs that are not patented because these crooks who say they're bleeding heart liberals would rather your heart bleed from, pericarditis than to have truthful information about drugs that are not patented, drugs that are in the public domain, in other words. They don't want freedom. They can't handle freedom. Freedom will kick their tails. Do you see it? They're that weak. And Jesus wants us to have a free society. But they can't handle that. They have to have fiat currency. They have to have fake media, fake medicine, fake money, fake wars, fake catastrophes, fake controversies, fake ideas about 7,000 genders and all these things. They just get this stuff. They make fake stuff up. The only way they have any power is because they have a lot of wealth, and they rig the conversation to elevate and gaslight people into saying, well, I guess everybody believes this. I got to go along with it too. Manufacturing a Truman Show reality. And electing people isn't going to do a thing. So all those nationalists and populists that kept telling us we need to have Section 230 reform. Well, look, I'm open to that, I guess, if that's all we had. But you see, when the market actually makes a choice, like a man buying this cesspool and cleaning it up so that people can actually have a free debate again on Twitter, that's a much, much clearer threat to evil than passing some legislation that would always be done in a way that rigs things even more so for the powerful. So like in theory, they always say liberty's in theory. Well, their stuff's the theory stuff. Because in a hypothetical theory, yeah, you could get some clean legislative bill passed that would break up these monopoly platforms in a way that would benefit freedom again. But in reality, the way the system works with its bureaucracies and its impenetrable wall of special interests, lobbying dollars, and two crooked parties that are completely lockstep in protecting the giant corporations that fund their existence, you wouldn't get that. You would get some token little, slaps on the wrist, so to speak, maybe here or there against these oligarchic corporations. But ultimately, the legislation would be deeply captured by the same interests that will act like they're afraid of it. That's how the Federal Reserve Act was passed, by the way. These people in the nationalist conservative world and populists, they need to get a little bit of a reality check in history. These people will feign and act like, oh my goodness, I don't want to be regulated. That's the same thing they did in the Federal Reserve Act. They put out a bill, the Aldrich plan, and they said, and then they had all the bankers come out and write editorials in all the newspapers saying, oh my goodness, don't pass this bill, And then they didn't do it that way. I think the Aldrich bill was actually the original Federal Reserve Act, and it didn't go anywhere. So then they basically swapped some words around on the bill. They called it the Federal Reserve Act, and all the people who had backed the Aldrich bill, the big banks and Wall Street banks, wrote editorials opposing the Federal Reserve Act. And so the public said, well, if all these oligarchic predatory bankers are against this, it must be it must be a win for the people. So they rallied towards it. And then you had the Federal Reserve Act passed around Christmas Eve, 1913. In the middle of the night. Like a thief in the night, you see? And what happened? Destruction of your purchasing power. You shouldn't have to gamble. You are living in a predatory system, not a free system. And we would live in a free system if we imitated Jesus, because we wouldn't be going to the state to get them to educate our children, to coin our money for us, to print our money for us, to decide what our nutrition is, to decide what our health care is, to decide what energy should be. All those things are basic, fundamental things to make your life better. That's why I talk about these same topics. I talk about health care. I talk about food. I talk about energy. I talk about your education. I talk about your money, right? Those are like basic, fundamental things that affect your life every day. And I try to go through those principles and explain how they've been impacted by people worshiping the state and its little crony friends. But this is an example, if Elon is successful, in the power of skin in the game, of rolling up your sleeves and getting into the mix of it and putting a risk, because he will be a target. They will make his life miserable in punishing his other corporations and downsizing his wealth and investigating him, because that platform for Twitter is way more valuable than just its profit. That's just a token thing. The real money is the influence that it has in shaping the perspective that there's a big, consensus on a certain matter. And so if they can lie to you and do big tobacco-style hit pieces on a Nobel Prize-winning drug like ivermectin and tell you it's horse paste when every other drug has an animal form too, but they don't emphasize that because they don't need to lie. They need to lie whenever it's in the service of attacking a generic drug or a generic public domain thing that threatens a new patented drug that they want to force everybody to take. And Twitter and Google and YouTube help make that a reality. Having a free internet would break that reality faster. And that's what they're terrified of. These grifters can't continue to pillage us without rigging the game. So we got to beat them at this game. Back in just a moment. Of Elon Musk trying to buy out Twitter and take it private. You can call in at 727-587-1040 to weigh in with your thoughts. Is this going to be accomplished? Will they prevent him? He suggested in his talk today that he had a plan B in case they rebuff his offer. Steve Bannon said he needs his price is a little bit of a lowball price for the value of what it's performed in the past on the stock market. But what do you think? 727-587-1040. Is Elon Musk going to buy Twitter? Is he going to succeed in actually owning it outright? And if he does, will he be able to accomplish turning it back to what it used to be when it was established, which was a free, open debate platform or discussion platform? It doesn't have to be debate, but a place where people could actually learn and actually have a fair rule set to engage one another. Is it possible for him to accomplish that? Or will they take Twitter? I mean, what's he got to do? Let's say he buys it and he does one thing. He puts Donald Trump back on. Will Apple and Google collude and take it off of their stores? Will they take it off of their stores and say, all right, this is a place for violence and Nazis, and no, not the Nazis we're funding in the Azov Battalion, not those guys. No, these are the Nazis that just believe in freedom and love and nonviolence and not murdering people and stuff like that. That's the Nazis we're talking about. Now, Elon Musk is allowing those people to talk, and he unbanned the president, who is the biggest opposition leader to the establishment. Is that what's going to happen here? 727-587-1040. 727-587-1040. Is Elon Musk going to actually change the game? And if he does change the game in Twitter world, will Twitter be ostracized like Gab? I mean, Gab's not even allowed to use, merchant accounts, PayPal, Visa, MasterCard, because they were a victim of a coordinated hit smear attack. And yes, they have some, platforms that are absolute free speech places are going to attract a disproportionate amount of people who have some pretty radical ideas. But that's the point. If you had the bigger platforms sticking to the free speech standards that they used to have to get as big as they did, then you would have a much, much more, I guess, a much less, you would see the extreme weird stuff a lot less, because people would congeal around in a true, fair algorithm, people with great, bright ideas that are not crazy and spewing calls for violence or revolutions or whatever, or hatred, true hatred. Now today, if you say, please don't murder somebody, that's considered hate speech. That's how stupid the word hate speech is. But true hatred, where you hate someone because of who they are, what they look like, and you want them harmed or something, that stuff would be drowned out in a big, large, robust platform that allowed for a fair algorithm and allowed the best ideas to win in the marketplace of ideas or debate. And it takes skin in the game to make that happen. And, you see, the establishment players saying, oh, my goodness, if Elon Musk can buy Twitter, it's going to be a dark age where billionaires will control the discourse on the internet. That's what's happening right now. They're so ridiculous. That's what we have right now. We have a collection of billionaires, but it's worse because they all coordinate across different companies. No one's going to be coordinating with Elon Musk. You think if Elon Musk buys Twitter that he'll have the ear of Apple and Google and yeah, we want to have free speech too. No, they're not. They're beholden to activist investors and activist corporations who are also beholden to activist investors and government influence. And so that's kind of, there's only one way to be evil, and it starts with not being evil too. That's the first way you have to go. You cannot respond to liars with lies, but you also can't kowtow and be an absolute purist who won't work with anybody who's not on your purity level or purist level of principles or whatever. So, but you have to put skin in the game. That's the way. You have to innovate and roll up your sleeves and fight and put your neck on the line and take risk. Because the people who profit from keeping our society at each other's throats in constant rivalry are going to do everything they can to continually rig the narrative in a direction that feeds that hate machine and that accusation machine of media today. And that's where we're at. Everybody believes they can be something, but everybody believes they can be something doing nothing but copying their neighbor. They don't realize that chasing after status is a waste of time. Everybody wants to look like they're changing the world. They want a postcard. Hey, see me here? I went to this place. It's called I Changed the World. See the photo of me in the postcard? That's me. I did it. No, you didn't do it. You just wanted to look like you did it. And everybody who sits in the peanut gallery can criticize people who are in the arena. But to actually get things done, you got to take risk. And it has to be your own risk, your own feet in the fire. What's that feet in the fire mean? I mean, they used to put people through rites of trials and rites of passage where you have to run through fire. And that was sacrificial rituals to allow you to become an adult member of a clan or society or a tribe. And our society today is about joining up as a gang and saying, hey, we found the right person to sacrifice. That's not going to work. It's going to require you to self-sacrifice your comfort, your self-righteousness, your, better than thou attitude, or your pride, your security to get things done. Without that, nothing's going to change. So we'll continue to have all this undifferentiation until people who love liberty and hate violence and actually live it out, not just preach about it, but actually live it out and making the world a better place. When those folks rise to the top and can impact the world, great progress could be made. And don't ever let people tell you, this is just a little side note, that, to be Christian means you have to reject the so-called liberal idea that history is progressing. I don't know what Christianity they've read, but the Bible begins in a garden and it ends in a city. And we were told to cultivate the world and to exercise beautiful, loving dominion, meaning make it better than when we arrived in our moment in history. That sounds like progress to me. I'm David Gornosky. Godspeed. Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gornosky. So glad to be with you live for another journey through the news and headlines together, guided by personhood principles, not toxic groupthink. And now it's Thursday in our second hour, which means we're going to take a break from our news and analysis of current events and politics and economics and that kind of thing. We're going to turn to the stars. We're going to look into the subatomic particles of our physical world. And that's our Science and You segment that we're going to do now. And we're joined by our Chief Science Advisor and physicist, Dr. Yu. How are you?
Thank you, David, for having me on. I'm doing great.
Well, great to have you as always, and we've got more interesting stories too. What we love to do on this show is try to take these big, highbrow topics and make them understandable and make sense in simple ways as best as we can for folks who do not have time or did not have the background for some of these technical questions. Here's a story in phys.org. Researchers engineer electrically tunable graphene devices to study rare physics. This is an international team of researchers at the University of Manchester's National Graphene Institute in the UK and Penn State College of Engineering has developed a tunable graphene-based platform that allows for fine control over the interaction between light and matter in the terahertz spectrum to reveal rare phenomena known as exceptional points. They published their results in Science. Dr. Yu, what is something that we can learn from this? What does this mean for us? Anything interesting here?
Oh, okay. One thing is we heard about a lot of graphene, right? So graphene, somehow we find out that it has amazing electrical property. It's the most efficient conductor, electrical conductor, by graphene, which means one layer of atomic, carbon atom. So they form a six-size shape, naturally. They were formed as they find under this kind of structure, and it's the most efficient way to conduct the electricity. So now based on the technology advance. So we use the graphene, use this property of graphene. We develop a lot of, use the graphene technology. We develop, in this case, called a tunable, is a platform. Is a platformer, so you can working on some on platform. So you can tuning the light in terahertz, light spectrum. So light at the terahertz frequency, the frequencies in that range. You can tuning the light in that range, and what they do, because the light would interact with the matters, right? So use lighting by tuning the light spectrum. So you can engineer, you can manufacture some kind of optical electronic device, and to make the device to develop some better conducting materials, and say we can produce some kind of beyond 5G, some kind of wireless technology, and can develop for high-speed communication networks. And so by using the amazing property of graphene, so this is graphene-based in the platform, so you treat it as a surface of special wave, and then you can control the light frequency. There's a different frequency of light, and you use that one to make or to engineer electronic device, and that have a potential application.
So do you think this is a breakthrough, or is this a nominal development?
Oh, okay. It may not consider earth-shattering because it's just application of a graphene property. However, the application, the outcome could be improve our current wireless, communication technology. So it could be revolutionary in technology perspective.
I see. That's very interesting. I want to turn to another story here. This one is in Jerusalem Post. It says, it's published a couple of days ago, it says, Hebrew University discovers new magnetic phenomenon. And it says that a recent study from Hebrew University of Jerusalem, published in the journal Nano Letters, revealed a phenomenon dubbed edge magnetism, which could change the future of nanotechnology. A magnet or magnetic object in the macroscopic world, our day-to-day world, behaves predictably. Magnets attract or repel each other based on their positive and negative orientation. However, at the nanoscale, where materials as thin as 100 atoms are studied, the rules can bend. When the researchers looked at nanomagnets, the images showed that the magnetic material only retained magnetism within 10 nanometers of the edge. A human hair is around 100,000 nanometers thick. Dr. Anahori, who led the research team, explained that in today's tech hardware climate, in which everything is getting smaller and faster, effort is focused towards small magnets with different shapes. Edge magnetism could lead to the production of long wire magnets only 10 nanometers thick, which could curve into any shape and be even more economic in their use of space and energy. This is particularly relevant to the field of quantum computing. The discovery of edge magnetism, although very small in size, could have a very big impact on the future of tech. Any thoughts on this? Edge magnetism? I've never heard of that before. Have you?
Oh, okay. So there's nothing surprising. So you see, whenever we're talking about the magnet, say bar magnet, when you measure the strength of magnetic field, what did you get? Always at the two poles, right? Because in the middle, the positive and negative magnetic field give you the mixture of positive and negative give you weaker magnetic field. So of course, if you measure, the strongest is always on the both ends. The same as edge in magnet poles. So when you align magnet particles, make them as a sheet of paper. If you measure magnetic field strength, of course, on the edge of the paper, right? It cannot be in the middle because the magnetic field, north and south, in the middle is always mixed. Of course, you would losing strength. On the edge will give you the strongest magnetic potential. The difference. right? So the anti-magnets, there's nothing really surprising. However, this is research has demonstrated that all the particles at the nano level, at the atomic level. So this is the nano level. They mentioned about 100 atomic, waves, right? Atom. So you make atomic sheet. Of course, the strongest magnetic pole will be on both edges. And they said, based on this one, they can wrap it, smaller size, wrapping it and create all different kind of magnetic property device, and use that one. And of course, you can improve the, because of the smaller size. And now you take advantage of the strongest magnetic field poles on the edge, and you can make all kinds of electronics. All electronics based on the property of magnetic property. Every single electronic things, they are the principle is based on the magnetic property, and create a semiconductor or all kinds of new products. So this one, of course, it is smaller size, and it can bend it in different shapes, right? Can create a new device which we may never see before, and could have a potential bigger and some kind of more amazing functions we never see.
Very interesting. Let's see. I want to go to another story, if we can. Hunting for gravitational waves from monster black holes. This is from Science Daily. It says, our universe is a chaotic sea of ripples and space-time called gravitational waves. Astronomers think waves from orbiting pairs of supermassive black holes in distant galaxies are light years long and have been trying to observe them for decades, and now they're one step closer. What can we learn from this story?
Okay, so this is another way to measure gravitational wave. Okay, in the previous, was it 2015? I believe that's where the first time, we said, we detect gravitational wave. Those waves use a LIGO detector, at California and some of the two facilities detect signal. Those are based on the mechanical vibration. So if you have a gravitational wave come in across the Earth, what happens is it's all compressed one side of the Earth and stretching the other side of the Earth, and which create this kind of very fast, short distance vibration. And so the detector, based on that signal, somehow would detect the gravitational wave. But that was in the 2015 development. And this is another way. So that instead of using mechanical device, instead we use a radio wave, and in particular, use gamma wave. If we can detect the gamma wave transmitted from the black hole, those super, millions of light years away, the black hole impact, created the gamma ray, in addition to radio wave. So use wave timing difference, arriving from the source, arriving to Earth, detect the slightly variance. And this variance is caused by, they said, by on the path. So they may, on the path we get here, so they may many other gravitational objects, gonna bending them or something. So based on the variation to detect gravitational wave. So that's the way. But so far, use either radio wave or use gamma ray detect. We have not detected anything. So why this paper says, okay, actually we can use the existing gamma, telescope and the radio scope telescope, to detect them. They said as long as we collect more data. So if we spend another 10 years down the road, okay, have enough data, and by analyze those data, we may be able to detect the variance. So the new technology is use a radio wave and gamma wave to detect gravitational wave, but it needs a lot of data. and a lot of time. So it could be a decade away to be able to prove if there is a gravitational wave or not. But my conclusion is so-called gravitational wave does not even exist. So the way we detect the gravitational interaction is nothing new. It's just a magnetic attraction. And we detect magnetic attraction, electromagnetic wave all the time. So I don't think, the effort is really worth it. But anyway, so it's a new way to confirm or deny a theory. So I'd like to see how eventually the result will be.
Let's take a break. We're speaking with Dr. Yu on Science and You, a Neighbor's Choice Radio. We'll be right back after this break. Neighbor's Choice Radio. We're doing our Science and You segment here with Dr. Yu, theoretical physicist, and you can join in on the conversation if you have a question by calling in at 727-587-1040. That's 727-587-1040, or you can email us hello@aneighborschoice.com. Going to this story in scientificamerican.com, it says, troubled U.S. neutrino project faces uncertain future and fresh opportunities. A new two-phase approach to building the deep underground neutrino experiment ignites controversy among particle physicists. This is a story by Thomas Luton. And so it's talking about how particle physicists in the U.S. hope to help a flagging flagship project to keep pace with rivals while also creating breathing room to reimagine the later stages of this design for this deep underground neutrino experiment called DUNE, D-U-N-E. Dr. Yu, what can we learn? What's the takeaway from this story here?
Okay. So this is another, a big project, just like the CERN. The Large Hadron Collider, the European, build this Large Hadron Collider. This is another big scientist experiment. Because this underground is assuming to be minimum 1,000 meters. This is minimum 1,000 meters. Oh, that means a kilometer, below the ground. To build this one, to prove what? To prove one of the fundamental particles in the standard model of physics, which is quantum mechanics. That's the two pillars of the physics: quantum mechanics and the theory of relativity. And in quantum mechanics and the standard model of the particle physics, that's the standard. They predict existence of this kind called the smallest particle. It's the size of a neutrino is about 1 to 10 million times mass less than electron. We know electron is a fundamental particle, right? Based on the standard model. But now we try to prove existence of this one. How to detect such small particles is that you have to build a device away from all the vibration, all the noises. Where can I have it? The deeper under the earth, away from the surface, disturbance. So that's why they try to build this one. And the problem is the cost, and the delay of time is cost. So they said, so they try to use abandoned homestake gold mine in South Dakota. So apparently, abandoned this mine has a depth more than a kilometer. I definitely, so that's already have. However, in order to dig up all the rocks, dirt, and to create called 4 hasty detection modules, that turns out to be much, much more difficult than anticipated. And what has happened? So initially, the cost was only $1.5 billion for the initial work. But turns out that even for initial work, the cost doubled. And so what happens is the schedule could be delayed by 10 years. And the consequences, if you delayed by that long, probably you lost the competitiveness even this experiment, because there are 6 neutrino detectors already existing on Earth, in the world, including one in the United States. Okay, but it's a smaller one, and they try to build this called the Dune, and together with the smaller one called the Long Baseline Neutrino Facility built by U.S., they try to use both of them and to prove existence of the smallest particle, neutrino, which is supposed to penetrating Earth without even any resistance to those particles. So that's why they try to. It turned out it's a very daunting task, but in my opinion, I don't think it's worth to spend this money for detection neutrinos, because to prove the standard model is correct, the effort eventually will fail, because that model is completely fundamentally wrong. Okay, so you cannot prove anything with we have so many evidence. We knew this model is wrong. Okay, but of course it's not in the general public. So if you try to spend $3 billion for initial phase, and it turns out the second phase could cost more, the entire project could cost more than the CERN, the Large Hadron Collider. They built $9 billion just for options, and this could be over $9 billion. Just started the operation and plus the maintenance. This could be costly, and I don't believe they will generate any useful results. But if you, based on the desire, if you determine to discover the only particle, which particular feature you have, you will find that one. But that does not mean that could be there's millions of other particles, and the neutrino particles, and I guarantee that one. Neutrino particle will not be the smallest particle in the world. Yeah. So that means what? Eventually, you find out the model has a problem. So maybe we should save the money. Abandon the project.
Yeah, save some money. I can see that. Well, I got just a minute left. There's an article I want to get a quick answer from you, and maybe we'll do more. We're out of time, but the question is, time might not exist at all, according to physicists and philosophers, but that's okay. That's the story from phys.org. Does time exist, Dr. Yu?
Oh, of course. Time, we all know. When the so-called time is a measure of existence, okay? And as long as we're existent, from this moment to next moment, so that's what the time is. It's a moment. It's a measure of existence, measure of change. As long as something exists and can change, can move, of course, you have to have a time dimension to measure. So I don't know the definition of the time based on those particular people. Well, but time definitely exists.
We're out of time. Thanks a lot, Dr. Yu. Let's make every moment count, right? A Neighbor's Choice will continue in just a moment. Listener Joe says there's never been anyone who can verbalize excitement about magnetism and physics like Dr. Yu. And I have to agree, there's no one like him that I've ever met. He's got more magnetic energy and, than anyone I've ever met about the topic of physics. And I think he's onto something that's light years ahead of whatever you're reading in the textbooks. And that's why A Neighbor's Choice spends that time every week where everybody else is talking about Joe Biden getting bird poop on him. We are teaching real physics for the future because you need to do that. Another listener, Patrick, says, God bless you, David. I'm proud to call myself a Christian again. Awesome. He says he feels like he's on a mission from God now. And I'm just looking at he's got a letter here. Maybe we'll read some of it more. We have time, but he says, I've never been so thankful to be alive and to know what I know. And don't stop what you're doing. You're saving lives. Very good. Very good, Patrick. Thank you for that note. And, that's the kind of things we hear. We hear people's lives being changed with getting toxic seed oil sludge out of their lives. We hear lives being changed by understanding physics for the first time in their life. And we hear lives being changed with people changing their whole relationships because they understand the anthropological revelation of the Gospels as we explain them for the average person. Nobody's seen anything like it before. Joining me now to explore some of these great ideas together is editor of Mises.org, Tho Bishop. How are you?
Hello, David. Always glad to join you.
It's great having you. And, it's an exciting day today for those who have been lamenting the ghettoization of the Internet for so long, like social media. And who knows what's going to happen next, but we're going to have to get your thoughts to weigh in right at the top of this segment here about the news that Elon Musk is trying to buy out Twitter and the reaction to it so far. What's your take, though?
It's been fascinating to see the reaction from all the right people. It's hysterics. I saw a great tweet about highlighting how many of them are making comparisons to either World War II or Marvel movies, which seems to be the go-to framework for a lot of modern-day blue check marks on Twitter to understand anything in today's world. I think this is a very promising development. I'm interested to see the reports that have come out since the offer was made in writing late yesterday. Has been interesting. On one side, we've seen reports from reporter Charles Gasparino with Fox Business claiming that there happens to be investigations now being pushed by the Biden administration and the financial regulators over Tesla and some other holdings of Elon Musk. It would not be shocking if there's some sort of backlash from the state trying to stop this. I just saw that Vanguard, which is a large managed investment group, they have now purchased over 10% of Twitter, which makes them and not Elon Musk now the largest institutional holder of Twitter stock, and something that might be a direct reaction to it. A lot of speculation about the intents of the Twitter board to prevent this from ever coming to a vote for shareholders. And it's just interesting to see here you actually have someone willing to put capital on the line to try to take back and restore an institution that he thinks is important, a fountainhead of the battle in free speech. The reaction has been fascinating, and there's I think fair criticisms of some of Elon Musk's business tactics in the past, and we can talk about his reliance on government subsidies and the like. But it is good to see someone of his power and stature, stand up to some of the biggest bullies in society today.
And it's a demonstration of the liberty argument, broadly speaking. I'm not saying libertarian. I'm talking about the liberty argument, the idea of freedom. There's a better argument, I think, to be had to fix a lot of the problems of censorship with skin in the game from a private standpoint rather than having some bill in Congress passed. As much as I've said, hey, maybe that could be something as an incremental step, I think the idea of someone like an Elon Musk having free speech in mind and owning a platform like this is a much better solution than begging the crooked DC to ever do anything honest by the people.
No, I agree entirely. I think any attempt on trying to fix some of these social problems within DC, I don't care who is nominally in power. The Leviathan, they have home field advantage when it comes to anything being done in DC. I think it's a little bit of a different conversation when we look at some of the stuff that say Governor DeSantis' approach on trying to rein in some of these corporations at the state level. I think that kind of that goes to very interesting differences in government institutions at that point. But yes, this is also why, and it's interesting. You see some people, particularly the more socialist of the left, kind of pick up on this. That this is a reason why they do not want to have a true elite based off of merit and not political privilege in a society. Because when you have someone that has the wealth to be able to challenge something of this institutional size. I mean, Musk can only do this because he's one of the richest people of all time. And this is why they want to diminish any free thinkers that will not go along with the ambition of the state. They fear free thinkers with the capital to act on their principles. And that's exactly what we're seeing playing out right now.
So if Vanguard is trying to gobble up more of Twitter than Elon Musk, is that revenge of the boomers? The boomers are coming back, to say, excuse me, wait a minute. We like the way we've rigged this conversation for big pharma and big seed oil sludge food and garbage trash. We want to keep it real nice like we have it already. Is that what's happening? I saw this comment, Eric Hartman, whoever, I don't know who this is, but he says, so let me get this straight. The progressive left is now rooting for Saudi Arabia, Wall Street, Vanguard, BlackRock, and against free speech, liberty, and the dude who makes electric cars and is going to Mars. And they're not leftists anymore. These are the reactionaries.
Well, they are the defenders of the regime. It will be interesting to see how, there is an outcome here where perhaps Vanguard is, viewing, is trying to make is going to go along. I mean, it's interesting when you break down, if you look at Twitter's largest or Tesla's largest institutional investors, you have Vanguard and BlackRock, there, which is just interesting when you consider, where Elon's own personal power comes from, something worth keeping in mind. I think when it comes to the Twitter environment, it's less a cultural dynamic of the boomers of old, rather than you do have just a large degree of true believers in the need to curate, what we're consuming in terms of media content. And they believe that there's a role for Twitter. I mean, it's always funny, right? I mean, this has been the go-to message made a variety of different ways, the most comically from Robert Reich yesterday, talking about how, free internet is the tool and the strategy of dictators and authoritarians. But there is this concerted effort to say that if we're going to maintain the democracy, right, in their terms, which democracy is now just simply whatever the standing regime approves of. If we're going to maintain this order, we cannot allow a free and open internet. And here you have a shot across the board to challenge precisely that foundation. This is something where, it does seem that there are people in power who are genuinely concerned about what this can do, and I think rightfully so. And so that's where it's going to be interesting to see the blowback to this. And I luckily, I don't think Elon is going in here naive. But again, if you start seeing a ramp up of pressure from both the Biden regime and some of these large corporate financial actors all working against him, it'll identify that there is something real here worth watching. And at that point, it'll be raise the stakes even all the more greater to make sure that Elon succeeds in this battle.
There's a tweet that a guy, a prince in Saudi Arabia, Al-Walid Talal, He says, I don't believe that the proposed offer by Elon Musk at $54.20 a share comes close to the intrinsic value of Twitter, given its growth prospects. Being one of the largest and long-term shareholders of Twitter, I reject this offer. And then Elon Musk responded saying, interesting, just two questions, if I may. How much of Twitter does the kingdom own directly and indirectly? And what are the kingdom's views on journalistic freedom of speech? I guess we could start by asking Khashoggi, or I guess we can't. We have to ask his widow, right?
Well, it's very interesting when you start having the international dynamic here. And one of the things I think is interesting as well is that one of the things that Elon has, I talked about earlier today when he was kind of outlining his vision for what Twitter is, he made clear that he's not pushing for a social media platform to go against the laws of a host country, so in theory, Saudi Arabia Twitter would be filtered through whatever the Saudi legal lens is. The implication being that for America, obviously, I think that's we would be far more protected than we are right now with the way Twitter governs itself. But I think that itself is a strategic sort of play to try to help, to try to undermine some of these arguments against this purchase by Elon from foreign interests. The other side of it, though, is interesting is, he talks about the valuation. I believe it was Goldman Sachs who's been brought on as on Twitter's behalf to try to help negotiate this offer. By Goldman Sachs' own financial advice, if you look at their quarter four analysis of Twitter, our good friends at Sierra Hedge highlighted this. They had Twitter as a sell at $30 going in at the start of the year. Obviously, with that makes Elon Musk's offer of north of $50 quite significantly higher than what Goldman's own public analysis is. And so again, we're going to end up seeing, I think, just how little, how willing a firm like Goldman Sachs, which for all of its other issues, just how willing they are to completely ignore even their own analysis publicly in order to defend a certain power structure here. And that makes this dynamic so fascinating on so many different levels.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it really brings out all the roaches out of the roach motel to see what's really behind the sausage making of the constant lies that we're being fed. I think people are sick and tired of this. We're sick and tired. Doesn't it feel, though, viscerally as if America and the world has been held back by a lot of handicaps that have really, really substantially held back humanity from progressing? Like you look at the beginning of the 20th, you look at the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, and things were just happening so rapidly. It was such an explosion. And then we're supposed to believe in this myth that everything just kind of got figured out and it was all figured out. And we know that's when the liars took over the narrative again. Well, that's when they said, okay, we figured out everything. It's combustion engines, it's this and that. We've got it all sorted out. Now we're just going to fine tune it. And everything got frozen in time, it feels like, in a lot of ways. Just nicer, slicker designs of cars and fancier things, iPhones and so forth. But there's just something feels like we've been held back. Something's been retarding us for some time. And it feels very malevolent. And it feels like it's affecting our health and our nutrition and our transportation and everything. And I think we just want to get it off of our back somehow. Though Bishop and I will discuss this when we return. Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gronowski here with Tho Bishop of Mises.org. So, Tho, doesn't it seem like something's been holding us back?
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is something that, Peter Thiel is perhaps the most articulate critique, a critic of kind of the state of the West right now. And we became far too complacent. And I think a lot of this goes, as with many of our much larger picture things, a lot of this can go back, I think, to the decoupling of wealth, the politicalization of money, in the way that ends up, stealing from the productive sectors of society, the true entrepreneurial class that promotes genuine well-being and makes these great leaps forward, and instead puts more and more of our wealth in society into the hands of those connected directly to the state and power. And bureaucracies live for its own self-preservation and prolonging, and so we're stuck in something that things feel like they're materially getting better and better every year, but we're not seeing what is being stolen from us with the rigged system that we have right now.
Yeah, we don't see it, and I don't know exactly the best way to combat it, except for to allow people off ramps off of the nightmare of inflation and so forth. I spoke with both Anna Paulina Luna and Anthony Sabatini this week, both of whom are running for U.S. Congress in Florida, and both sounded open and or very excited to act on the idea of removing taxes on gold and silver, so people could have it as a savings account that will hedge against inflation. And I think this is something that you've talked about as well. What could you do in U.S. Congress if you were there if you could, wave a magic wand, what would you do to help people have access to opportunities to get outside of this inflating currency?
Well, the biggest thing is, again, allowing for true off-ramps from, making sure that our long-term savings is free from the state. And there is something I think very simple that can be done. I think it would only require a few senators really committed to the cause to do it. But ultimately it comes down to eliminating taxes on alternative currencies, which gives the dollar such a huge advantage, as an asset. And what you could do is eliminate the capital gains taxes on gold, on silver, on cryptocurrencies. And that is something that can be done at the federal level. That's something that can be done in a tax bill. This is similar to legislation that Dr. Ron Paul advocated for in the creation of parallel competing currencies.
I want to unpack that a little bit, because he had a few different bills that he would put out to do different things. What do you think is the simplest way to get the most done? Would it be, because he was talking about repealing legal tender laws and allowing competing currencies, what's the simplest solution if you had a congressional ability to, or you said, and what do you mean by just a few senators could get this done? What does that mean?
Well, so if you eliminate taxes, the capital gains taxes, then it makes because right now currently.
You mean eliminate it for everything, or just for these things? Capital
for these assets in particular. I'd love to go broader in any sort of tax reduction, but in particular, though, if for this purpose, if you simply eliminate the tax advantage that dollars have. So again, so if you now have the ability to go in between dollars and gold or dollars and Bitcoin, and it's not a taxable event, which currently it is. Currently, crypto laws have gotten even worse over time. This was one of the bad components of the 2018 Trump tax cut, is that technically you're supposed to pay your capital gains every time you exchange a cryptocurrency at all. So if you go from Ethereum to another coin, or Bitcoin to Ethereum or whatever, every time you make a transaction like that, you're supposed to pay whatever the valuation is, the capital gains that you have on that asset. And so that makes it very burdensome, particularly for businesses trying to trying to use it, right? It limits its ability to be used easily as a medium of exchange. If you eliminate that protection the dollar has, then you make it a lot easier for Americans to save, in say a Bitcoin or gold, knowing that they can easily make that transaction if they need to without feeling any tax burdens with that. And the reason you only need a few senators is that, the one thing that Republicans are good at in D.C. is passing some sort of tax reform bill. It's something that only needs 51 votes rather than 60, which is what you need for some larger reform things. If you can have a few senators that make up that number necessary to get to 51 votes, to say you're not getting our votes without this dynamic, without this in the bill, then it gives them maximum leverage for an issue of this great importance. Marco Rubio was able to do this. He said, I'm not going to vote for the 2018 bill unless we double the child tax credits, which was a policy priority of him. So again, if we're now looking at after 2022, let's say a 53-47 Senate, one person can't hold up, Rand Paul, being a Paul can't hold it up on his own right. But if you add in like a Cynthia Lumens, who's a crypto friend from Wyoming, who's pushed some really interesting legislation from her perspective. If you add in, if a Blake Masters becomes a senator from Arizona who's very motivated on this issue, if you have, there's a guy named, there's a new Senate candidate up in New Hampshire on the Republican side, Bruce Fenton, I believe, who is a crypto guy. If you just had 4 of these people saying you're not going to get our votes without this done, this is something that could be achieved in policy by probably not 2023. I don't think a Biden administration would sign off on this, but at the very least, 2025, you get a Republican White House again, the Republican-controlled Senate. This bill could be done, and that would be a revolution for the money side of things in America.
Would people say that would destroy the dollar and plummet the economy or something, though, if something like that happened?
People will argue that, there's always scare tactics involved. What it does is simply allow for off-ramps for those that have concern about the long-term future of the dollar. It wouldn't have a catastrophic attack day one, right? It's simply, but because the issue with the dollar right now is not the competition, it's the way that it's being managed by the Fed. It's the inflation. It's the policies of the Federal Reserve Bank. I don't think those things are avoided by protecting it, but we should be protecting Americans by giving us other options. I'm
sure some of the preferred stakeholders of our government, like Saudi princes, would weigh in on that too, wouldn't they? They'd be like, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Yeah, there would be a lot of interest groups determined to keep that privilege, and that's why that's where the battle is, stopping those people.
Well, Phil, I always appreciate having you on, and anything else you'd like to point out here in this last minute we have you?
No, I just hope people appreciate that, there's so much that our society is shaped from by that money issue. We're trying to, at the Mises Institute, we're trying to produce a lot of great content on this point to make it easier to understand. And in coming up soon, we're going to actually have an animated What Has Government Done to Our Money series that I'm very excited about. They'll go into this issue. So hopefully we can talk about that series in the future. But it's always good to join you and your great audience down in Tampa.
When does it come out?
It'll be coming out next couple weeks. So I'll update it as soon as we have a good working link.
Will it be at Mises.org or another URL?
Yes, it'll be at Mises.org and a few other places.
All right, thanks again, Phil.
Thank you, Dave.
That's it for A Neighbor's Choice. You can email me hello@aneighborschoice.com. I'm David Gronowski. Godspeed.